This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 3, Episode 236 of JumbleThink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to JumbleThink, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own big ideas and dreams into reality too. Today on the show, we are changing it up. We have a lot of new listeners. A lot of you have missed some incredible guests. We want to give you some of the best of JumbleThink today. We're bringing back our friend Leon Logothetis. He is the guy behind the Kindness Diaries, both the book and the Netflix series. We're also going to talk to our friend Ryan Williams, who wrote the book, The Influencer Economy. And in our final segment, you are going to hear from Bill Sheff. Bill is a writer. He's written for tons of people like President Obama, but most well-known, he is a writer, or was a writer, from Late Night with David Letterman. He's also written for magazines and novels. Really cool guy. So today, we're looking back at those guys. You're going to love today's episode. So let's jump on in. Hey there, welcome to JumbleThink. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. Super fun episode lined up for you today. We're bringing back some great friends of the JumbleThink podcast. Before we get going, if you're new to JumbleThink and you've missed some of these episodes, now's a great time to go check them out. How can you do it? Head on over to your favorite place to listen to podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're there. Go check it out. For iTunes, it's super easy. JumbleThink.com/iTunes. And for Spotify, JumbleThink.com/Spotify. We also want to thank our sponsors for today's episode. We've got our good friends over at Penji and over at OpportunityInChina.com. Here's more about Penji. Penji is doing cool stuff. They are your unlimited graphic design at a low monthly subscription. Yes, that's right. Unlimited graphic design for that monthly subscription rate. What you need to do is head on over to Penji.com, use the code JUMBLE to get 15% off your first month. We also want to thank our sponsors, OpportunityInChina.com. They are helping people find teaching and learning experiences in Asia. Go on over to OpportunityInChina.com to learn more about what they are doing. First up on today's Best Of, we are talking to Leon Logothetis. He is got a crazy story. He went from stockbroker in London to traveling the world on the kindness of strangers. He's written a book about it, and that book has now been turned into a documentary. He has 2 seasons out on Netflix called The Kindness Diaries. Super cool show. Our family loves it. You should go check that out. And to give you a little taste of what you have in store for you, here's a little bit more about his story from our interview from Season 2. Now, you are doing so much, but how would you define yourself and what you do?
That is a great question, actually. And for many years, I had no idea. I was like, what am I doing? Who am I? I guess the straight-laced way is I'm a TV host, author, motivational speaker. But the Leon way is I'm just going out and living and trying my best to fulfill my dreams whilst helping others do the same. I hope.
I love that, because we're all about dreamers, and you have been on this incredible journey. But I want to back up because you started your career in the world of investment banking or a stockbroker, I guess is the better way to say it.
Yeah, I was a broker in London.
So how, you're on this journey. How did you know things aren't quite right, I need to reassess what I'm doing and make a change?
Well, I think one word that would answer that succinctly is pain.
Okay.
I was in a lot of emotional pain.
Yeah.
On the outside, I had everything. But on the inside, I really felt very broken. And I kept on going to this job and following what I like to say is someone else's dream.
Okay.
Living someone else's life. And finally, the pain just got too much for me. And I stumbled across the movie The Motorcycle Diaries.
Yeah.
Which is a romanticized version of Che Guevara traveling around South America relying on kindness.
Right.
Something about that movie that really, it was the tipping point, let's say.
Wow. That's crazy. Now, if we back up, for most people who are very giving, who are just, trying to find other people to help and be on that journey, which is what the Kindness Diaries is about, that's something that's part of them from a very young age for most people. For you, this whole journey of chasing dreams, finding the life that brings you fulfillment, when did that really start for you?
I think it started after I watched that movie.
Okay.
Although it had been kind of, part of who I was for many years, but I didn't have the courage to face it. I didn't have the courage to actually put myself in those types of situations. And it was the movie that kind of nudged me towards going out into the world and doing my best to live as openly and as freely as I could. So actually, it had been inside me for many, many years, but it hadn't really come out until that movie.
From what you're saying, it sounds like you were struggling with this place of really finding significance and purpose. You've made this shift, and now you're really chasing that dream. For you and what you're doing today, how are you finding that significance and purpose?
Well, I mean, the way I find significance and purpose I find by going out into the world and doing my best to meet the world and let the world see me as I see the world too. Like, by going out into meeting people and touching their lives, hopefully in a positive way, I get my life touched in a positive way as well. I always tell people that kindness is a win-win.
Wow.
Yeah, when you go out and you're kind to someone, whether it's on a big journey or going to Starbucks, you win because you feel better, and the other person wins too. So it's a win-win.
That's so cool. You run your own businesses. You're creating content. All of us who are entrepreneurial, that are creating our own path, that are chasing dreams, we struggle with obstacles. What's one obstacle you're currently working to overcome?
It's a good question. So you may not think that I would answer it this way, because my show, I kind of do come across as, well, I would hope I do, as opening myself up and being a little bit vulnerable. But I would say being vulnerable,
Wow.
Many of us aren't vulnerable. We choose not to open up our hearts, not to share our inner worlds, because we have a fear of being maybe crushed.
Yeah.
So I would say that would be something that I'm working on, to become a little bit more open, a little bit more vulnerable, to share my truth, things like that.
That's very, very cool. And in this new season, you've launched Kindness Diaries. You're still traveling quite a bit. You're speaking a lot. What's the next big goal you have for the next season of life?
The next season of life, I think you're in my head. I think you've been, you have some psychic powers. Look, I would say that yes, I've traveled. Yes, I've seen the world, and hopefully I've experienced the love. I've shared the love. But I would say that the next thing is really to kind of find someone to share it with.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a challenge to keep on traveling alone and coming back and not really having like a family per se. So I would say, on a personal note, that would be something that I would want to do. And it's interesting because many people do it the other way round, in that they get married, they have a family, and then they realize when their kids grow up that they want to go out and travel and see the world.
Right.
I've kind of done it the other way, where I've gone out and seen the world, and maybe now is the time to kind of not settle down, because I'll never live a normal life, however you want to determine what normal means. But I would like to have a family.
Leon, you've got a lot of cool content. You've got the Kindness Diaries. You've got you have a couple books, actually. You have some great resources about Leon's Foolproof Adventure Guide and the Ultimate Daycation. How can people connect and find what you're creating, what you're doing, and really connect with this content?
Well, the best way really is just to Google either the Kindness Diaries or my name, and sometimes my name is difficult. So it's best to just Google the Kindness Diaries, and everything else will come up. And you can find my site, which is leonlogothetis.com, stuff like that.
That's very cool. Let's dive into the Kindness Diaries. It is, what is it, 13 parts to it on Netflix?
Yeah, it's 13 episodes. That's season 1, and season 2 is coming in early next year.
Oh, cool.
Where I traveled from Alaska to Argentina in a 50-year-old car.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. That's exciting. Let's talk about season 1 and then talk about where you're going and what happens in season 2 a little bit more. You started in LA and you went across the world and back to LA. Through all of the United States, you went over to Europe and through Asia and had a lot of cool stops along the way. Let's see, Nebraska, Pittsburgh, New York, Italy, Sarajevo, Montenegro, Kosovo, Greece, Turkey, the Taj Mahal in India, Calcutta, Thailand, Cambodia, Vancouver, and then back to LA. It's a cool journey, but it's not just a travel show. You are literally surviving from place to place on the kindness of others. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so basically I purchased a vintage yellow motorbike with a sidecar.
Okay.
I called him Kindness One, sort of like Air Force One, but a little bit yellower. And I circumnavigated the world. I started in LA, ended up in LA. I had no money, no food, no gas, no place to stay, and basically relied entirely on kindness, but with a bit of a twist. And the twist was that unsuspecting Good Samaritans received a life-changing gift.
That's so cool. And I think of watching that show with my wife. We were sitting there. That was our evening show for a week or two and loved watching it. One story that stood out to me was in Pittsburgh and this gentleman you meet. Share a little bit about how often the people who have least give the most.
Yeah, so the story you're talking about is Tony.
Yeah.
I would go up to people in the street and ask them if I could stay with them. And most of them would say no, which is, of course, understandable. And I went up to Tony. I asked him the same question, can I stay in your house tonight? And he looked at me and he goes, look, I'm really sorry, but I'm homeless. So, I felt a little bit ashamed because I had just asked a homeless man to stay in his house.
Wow.
But he then turns around as I'm about to walk off and he says, well, you know what? If you want, you can stay with me tonight. I will feed you. I will protect you. I will give you some clothes. And there was something really quite profound about that. And I ended up staying with him. He ended up feeding me. He ended up giving me some food. He ended up giving me some clothes. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And he taught me two really powerful things. He taught me, one, that true wealth is not in our wallets, it's in our hearts.
Wow.
He taught me, two, that if Tony can be kind, then why can't I? I have no excuse. And we have no excuses. And the third thing that I did for him, which was really a beautiful thing for me and for him, was I put him up in an apartment and sent him back to school. And he always says to me, people always say, oh, Leon, you changed his life. And I'm like, well, you know what? No. He changed my life.
Wow.
By opening his heart in such a beautiful way.
Wow, that's incredible. And you were on really a journey of faith because often we survive on what we know or the job we have or whatever that is in our life. We try to live in the place of the known, but you were living in a place of the unknown, stepping out into faith and really letting faith open the doors of possibility. That had to be filled with a lot of fear in moments of rejection when you walk up to a person or where are you going to spend the night? And sometimes you can't find someone to help you or is willing to help you. So how did you face that fear or the obstacles of daily life without knowing something and relying on a faith? That's
a brilliant question. And I think I put myself in a situation where I had no choice but to rely on faith. Because, I brought along a film crew. I had a mission to execute. And the only way that I would successfully manage it is to believe. And by putting myself in a box, let's say, and getting rid of all the exits, I had no choice but to rely on faith. I had no choice but to rely on love. I had no choice but to rely on kindness. I had no choice.
Wow.
And that was a little thing that I did. I'm not sure if I did it consciously, but as I look back on it, it helped a tremendous amount to have no choice. That was it.
Wow. In that journey, you broke each episode into a topic. And I love that. The gift of love, the gift of security, inspiration, transformation, abundance, service, the gift of tomorrow, education, joy, protection, sight, loyalty, gratitude. Each of those lessons, I'm assuming that they're titled for lessons that you took away from that time or people along the way. Maybe it wasn't that, but what was the greatest lesson that you learned on your journey?
The greatest lesson I learned was that we are all the same.
Okay.
We live in this world where we are told that we are different. We are told that there are others. We build walls. We get angry. And we are told things that are just not true. And when I traveled the world, I experienced the sameness. I experienced that even if someone looks different, at base, they are the same. They just want to be heard. They just want to be seen. They just want to be loved. They just want to live. And I was staying in the slums of India, and I saw this. I woke up in the morning and I saw this woman kissing her two daughters goodbye, and they were evidently off school. And in that moment, I realized that her love is the same as the lady in Beverly Hills and her love for her kids, or the lady in Iran and her love for her kids. We are the same.
So, that brings up a really important topic. And in our culture, in our time in history, we seem to be facing more and more division. Us against them, us against the world, us against whatever it is. I mean, we see it in politics, we see it in nationalism between countries. How can we start really facing this challenge of division and really saying, this isn't the reality? You talk about us being the same. How do we start living that way and stop perpetuating this lie that divides us?
Turn off the news.
Okay.
Travel, meet people, get out of your comfort zone. Go and have a connection with someone who doesn't look like you. Because when you do, you realize that, why are you angry?
Wow.
Like, I'm not saying that anger isn't part of the way a human being works, because it is, and sometimes anger is justified. I'm just saying that if we just fail to see, if we dehumanize people, then it's easy to dismiss them.
Wow.
They are no different to you, and they are no different to I. They may have a different religion, they may have less money, they may have more money, but they are the same.
On the episodes, I'm sure there's a lot of stories that weren't told. Can you tell us maybe one of the stories that didn't get covered in the Kindness Diaries that maybe you wish would have been a part of the documentary, that story?
I would say in season 1, the main story that didn't get shared was my personal struggles.
Wow.
Yes, you see the struggles of trying to get from A to B and people saying no and rejections, but the deep personal issues of rejection, failure, wanting to give up. And it's kind of skimmed a little bit, but that's one of the things that I think I regret not putting in. And in season 2, it will be in there a little bit more.
And, there are tons of moments throughout that are just incredible. I think of I think it was Scottish man who his son was getting married. It was just a brilliant and lovely story of so much sacrifice and seeing how you were able to give back to him. For you on the journey, there must have been a lot of highs and lows. What was your highest moment where you were just like, wow, this is incredible?
So one of the highest moments, there were so many high moments, but one of the highest moments, I was on a ship crossing the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I've been on a ship for 10 days. And I don't know if you've ever been on a ship for 10 days, but
no,
it's so monotonous. Like you start feeling like you're in a different world.
Wow.
I saw land for the first time. And I was, when I went through the Straits of Gibraltar, and I couldn't control myself. I was so happy. It's little things like that, little moments where you become so grateful, You take it back into your everyday life. And if you're sitting in a line in Starbucks and you're frustrated, you're like, you know what? Don't be frustrated. You spent 10 days on the ocean. You can spend 5 minutes in a line.
Yeah.
So little things like that were really quite beautiful.
There is so much more to that interview, and if you are enjoying the conversation, make sure you check out Season 2, Episode 51 with Leon Logothetis, where we continue this conversation. It's a super fun episode. In a moment, we're going to be back to talk to our friend, Ryan Williams. Today's episode is being sponsored by our friends over at Penji. Here is more about Penji. Penji helps startups, agencies, and marketing teams achieve more with unlimited graphic design support at one flat monthly rate. Their easy-to-use online platform pairs you with professional designers and lets you create as many design projects as you want. Think of it as your monthly subscription to top-notch design. No contracts, no hourly billing, just fast, simple, and affordable graphic design for all of your needs. Use the code JUMBLE, JUMBLE, to get 15% off your first month of Penji. Where can you check that out? Penji.com, and use the code JUMBLE. Now let's check out some of the conversation we had with Ryan Williams. Super excited to share this clip from our interview with Ryan Williams. He is an expert in the world of influence. He literally wrote a book on it, The Influencer Economy. On this clip, he shares how you can use storytelling and emotion to begin influencing others with the messages of significance. Let's join that conversation. You are obviously doing something you're passionate about, but how did you get there? Because your story's pretty inspirational.
Yeah, I got here. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, in a flyover state in the Midwest, and loved growing up there. And now I live in California, so my life's taken a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
And when I went to, growing up, I was always a curious kid, and went out of my way to find things to push the envelope. And I interviewed Barbara Bush when I was in fifth grade because she came to our school because of the Iowa caucus, and that was remarkable. And then I actually met Gorbachev when he came to my high school in Connecticut. In the late 90s. So I always had these funny encounters with people that I didn't really think much about. And then later in life, I was graduating college, no idea what I wanted to do. And I struggled with clinical depression, and I was doing stand-up comedy simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I will let you and your listeners be the judge if I was funny or not. You can imagine what it was like, me being on stage and not feeling the effects of the crowd or reading the room, but just putting myself out there. And my room was in my apartment. I was living in Washington, D.C. I had beer bottles all over the floor. I had note cards all over the desk for my comedy jokes, and I had linens stacked up all over my apartment for weeks, not making my bed. I really struggled to breathe, and realized I didn't have to be the star when I was doing stand-up, and so I could be behind the scenes. And I marketed the shows like nobody in Washington, D.C. or in the Mid-Atlantic region for comedy festivals, dive bars, anything really to get a room of people to laugh. I excelled at this.
Yeah.
And so that was really one of my first career pivots, where I realized, marketing was very much a forte of what I could do and help other people to get their voice out there.
So cool. And that journey was very accidental. You're kind of floating through life, and now you live a very intentional life. And as you go through this journey of depression, stand up, and then really understanding who you are, how did this spark of passion to help others achieve that same kind of awareness and ability for them to step into the influence that they're supposed to have? How did that aha moment start for you?
That's a great question. And I will start by saying I'm a middle child. Always been a facilitator and a peacemaker, and someone who works to elevate others to get along. That's just my birth order, I think, affected that a lot. And when I was solving problems, I worked for a lot of tech startups in Los Angeles. One was acquired by Disney. I was the first employee there. to we helped launch Pixar on social media with promoted
Wow.
tweets and Facebook
Yeah.
apps to sell tickets for Toy Story 3. And I promoted the movie Up, if you remember that one.
Yeah, great movie.
Getting like tens of millions of views on YouTube, doing media buying. And then I went to Machinima, another tech media startup that Warner Brothers acquired, and that was a video game network. We were getting
Yeah, they're the people behind Minecraft, right?
Minecraft. Yeah, we helped market all these games, and we had 4 billion video views a month
Wow.
of people consuming our content. And
Yeah.
so I found that I was really good at navigating, as an organizational development major. So I was always good at tying together different parts of organizations that
Okay.
didn't talk. And I found social media as that currency because no one knew how to use Facebook or Twitter or Instagram in the early days, or even MySpace back then. And social media was the tying um, platform for people in the company to talk, because you had to align your goals. And
Yeah.
that was the first time I realized that I could actually do this in a way that was beneficial for organizations, and
Okay.
bring my marketing and comedy back full circle, and my degree in college, and being more of a curious kid, and embracing that.
It's so cool. And being able to have that journey. I mean, you've had so much success uh, and great impact on your side of things, and working with these amazing companies like Disney and Warner Brothers and all the companies in between, like Pixar. And so through that process, I'm sure that you've gotten to moments where you just feel like this is an incredible story of finding fulfillment or significance or purpose in what you're doing. For you, what is that place of meaning that you're really finding in doing what you do?
Yeah, I like the word purpose. I
Okay.
think was a great way to frame all this, because it's so easy to get lost in your passions.
Yeah.
And we're both passionate about, podcasting, but that's only part of what we do.
Right.
And I know people that got lost in podcasting, and they're just in the weeds, and they're not making any money, and they think it's helping them. And so I think that purpose really matters. And for me, I think that what I'm very, motivated by is helping other people to raise their profiles, their status, and create opportunities.
Yeah.
And that comes through collaboration. And I have an uncanny ability to do cold email outreach to important people
Yeah.
and get them to react.
Okay.
And so I can write a very good cold email to pitch influencers, and figuring out what to give people, what to ask for people, and how to build relationships in the long run versus a quick deal, which everyone, as you know, in California, from Silicon Valley to Los Angeles, want quick deals. And that's
Right.
the opposite of my philosophy.
Okay. That's pretty incredible. Now, you have been doing this for a while, but what is one challenge that you're currently working to overcome in your own business and what you're doing?
A challenge that I know you can empathize with is I have a lot of income coming in that's supplemental,
Okay.
and so it's hard to turn down work. But if it's not a big enough retainer, and I'm fortunate to be in this position, but it's hard to turn down work. And I work with a lot of people that I say, "Oh, you're my friend. I want to help you."
Yeah.
And it's not like I have a friend who's helping me price out my consulting offering,
Yeah.
and he's like, "You don't need any more of these clients that are, a lot of work for less money,
Right.
but they're your friends."
Yeah.
And so you really have to figure out like where you're gonna get your bigger your whales, as they call them in Vegas. The people that spend at your casino.
Yeah.
And I think I think I imagine you feel the same way.
Yeah. It's so hard because you want to help people. I mean, that's, at least for me, really part of my core is this desire to help. And sometimes the right answer to help is to say no, because you're never going to be able to really help them in the way that they need, because they're not right for you. They're not the right customer, but because they're a friend, you make that concession, and it turns out to really be bad for everyone.
Yeah, you waste both parties' time. So I'm a firm believer in making things a win-win.
You're right.
And trying to find, and I won't pitch you, and I hope you don't pitch me, just in general speaking, unless it's a win-win for both of us to opt in and collaborate and make it beneficial. And whether that's money as a transaction where you pay me for my service, or we trade and barter, or even I just help you for the sake of it, it's got to have our own self-interest aligned to make sure that it works.
And I love the word collaboration. We're going to dive more into that in segment 2, and how collaboration is critical for this journey of entrepreneurship and influence in the influence economy. Uh, I want to close this segment and talk a little bit about what is the future of what you're doing. What's the next big goal or next thing that you're looking towards in what you do?
My next big goal is to get the stories of other people out there more through my books, my talks, workshops, and then, through that, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I have uh, I have a lot of experience public speaking because I've done stand-up comedy, 50 times and perform at the Improv. And
Right.
I was actually I worked at the door. I was a doorman at the Improv too.
That's
And I've
crazy.
seen
Wow.
300 comedy sets from Chris Tucker to Dave Chappelle, Mitch Hedberg, all these Brian Regan, brilliant comedians, right? So I know how to interact with crowds. And I feel like that's something that I'm really focused on creating bigger dents in the world around being in rooms with people and sharing stories, whether it's public speaking, workshops, or trainings.
The things that influence us as children and how it impacts us as adults. For me, I think back to my childhood, and part of the reason I love like New York City and I love media and communication so much is because I looked up to David Letterman as the guy who was able to communicate. And recently, you were able to meet and encounter a childhood hero for you. So tell us about that story.
Yeah. And by the way, totally agree. Like Late Night with David Letterman, the top 10 lists were I used to buy those books
Yeah,
of
yeah.
all the top 10 lists and like go through them with my family. And yeah. And so Larry King and I, someone I used to call growing up in the Midwest, I called his radio show.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know that before he got on CNN and became this global figure, he was a radio host for decades.
Right.
He had the show in Washington, D.C. I'd call from Des Moines, Iowa.
And didn't he have a show in like Fort Lauderdale when like way early in his career?
Yeah, exactly. He was he was a Florida guy, Miami.
Yeah.
And was friends with Jackie Gleason and has these great stories where he was Florida for a while and then went up to Washington, D.C., where he was on CNN. And he did the radio show from there. I would call. I was the Red Baron. He gave me a nickname. Very high pitched voice. 11-year-old kid. I'm calling at 1 a.m. because it was during an Open Phones America segment.
Bro,
I'm recording it on dating me. I was recording it not on a laptop but on one of those Sony yellow boom boxes that was like water resistant and the Walkman style. So I'm in there calling him. I'm the Red Baron. I'm high pitched guy. I'm talking about sports and who knows what. And he invites me to dinner in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And he puts me on hold and he's like, hey, if you're in D.C., I go to this restaurant called Duke Zebert's. It's an old steakhouse, since gone out of business. And so I threw on my red sweater and my family was visiting our cousins in Washington, D.C. in the summer. And we all got our Sunday best on and we went to Duke Zebert's Steakhouse and hung out with Larry King.
Wow.
And then a couple years later, my mom ran into him randomly at a restaurant and said, hey, I'm the Red Baron's mom. And he's like, the Red Baron's mom? How's that kid doing? And so at that point, I'm like 15 and he invites us to the TV show when we were in Washington, D.C. And so these funny encounters, you chalk it up like, oh, that's a good story. And, a little bit random. You can't really, you can't contextualize that like at a party, people don't get it. And then suddenly I'm in LA. I live here now. He's in Beverly Hills. A friend of a friend connected us. We had breakfast a couple weeks back.
Wow.
And he's like, the Red Baron, I'm wearing a red vest for you. And the Red Baron returns. And he's really happy because I'm essentially, my wife was joking, I'm like his biggest fanboy. I'm over here telling everyone at the table about how I used to like worship this guy and call his radio show as like a prepubescent 11-year-old dude.
Yeah.
And so he's like, the Red Baron's welcome anytime at the breakfast. And so I'm like, this is amazing. I can't even express this to people. This is so crazy. And now I'm writing a chapter in the book, my next book about storytelling, how all of us need to think about our stories and how ongoing our stories are.
Wow.
And we can't think of them as ending. And we need to be persistent and purposeful with how we run our life because you never know where things can end up. Yeah. And I never knew I'd meet Larry. I knew I'd actually tried to reach him before and I got turned down.
Wow.
So this was a very accidental encounter. And so I feel like, a lot of us, tying it back to the first segment, I have a term, we need to think about being unintentionally rich.
Wow. Okay.
And where being intentionally rich, it's very methodical. People want to formulate their life, but that's often defined by money.
Mm-hmm.
And when the people I profile in my book they're unintentionally rich, meaning they just happen to have these situations come to them. And I feel like that's, richness in friends, your network, and obviously money. And so that was an unintentional encounter that really was intentional because I tried to meet him, but because it was so spontaneous in the moment, the Red Baron returns. It was something that Larry just, ran with.
Yeah. That's so crazy. And it's amazing. I love how you said there that our stories are continuums. They don't necessarily end the way we expect. And sometimes they resurge or return in a way that's unexpected. And when we try to make something happen, sometimes it doesn't. But when things are in the right season, right time for a new part, a new chapter of that story, it comes back and re-enters our life. It's a weird journey we're on as humans to live in this place of story, and often we're so looking to the future or looking to the past that we're not present in the moment. Tell us a little bit about this new journey of incorporating story into what you're doing at a higher level than what you've done in the past. What are some of the discoveries you're making about storytelling, being effective in it, and how that draws your audience, draws your customers, draws your clients into being a part of what you're doing?
Well, I love the fact your podcast is about the story of ideas. And that's really where, the thesis of my work comes, is how do you make ideas happen and executable? So the best ideas don't always win, as we know.
Yeah.
But often the best stories win, the best compelling narratives, the best emotional reactions you can elicit from people. And you have a very quick snap judgment that people give you oftentimes within 2-3 minutes. And my research have shown, talking to story experts that do this for a living, that are professional speechwriters, that have worked with some, big executives, that emotion is what matters.
Okay.
Really emotion, connecting with people on an emotional level that matters, and being memorable, whether they agree or disagree, like you or not, is more important than being just there and a bland fly on the wall type person that isn't memorable. Because if I'm a firm believer, like when I give a talk, I'd like to know quickly if you like me or not.
Okay.
And I can try to win you over, or I can just give up on you. But at the very least, I want you to make that decision very early on. So then I can find the people to self-select that I could find to be a collaborator in the long run. And most people, they're neutral, they're lukewarm, but being bold with your story in a way that resonates with others, I call that your, everyone needs an underdog story, a tearjerker.
Yeah.
A way for you to connect emotionally, because we all empathize with people that overcome great obstacles to succeed.
There is a lot more to this interview with Ryan Williams. You should check it out. You can check that out at jumbleThink.com. Check out Season 2, Episode 49. It's a lot of fun. I think you're going to enjoy that. In a moment, we're going to be back with Bill Sheft to talk about Letterman. We're going to talk about working with Obama and so much more. It's a lot of fun. We'll be right back. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com. Here's a little bit more about OpportunityInChina.com. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospect? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path you should take? Well, you are not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit OpportunityInChina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China. Or, if you have a bachelor's degree already, OpportunityInChina.com provides access to jobs in the educational sector all across China. Now, working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network, bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization, and opening up doors you never knew existed. Seize your opportunity now. Visit their website for more information at OpportunityInChina.com. Now let's jump into our final segment where we revisit a conversation with Bill Sheft. In this final segment, we are revisiting our conversation with Bill Sheft, He is known for his writing on Late Night with David Letterman and The Late Show with David Letterman. He has written several novels, including The Ringer, Shrink Thyself, and Time Won't Let Me. Beyond writing for late night shows and novels, he has written for tons of other publications, including ESPN, Magazine, Sports Illustrated, The New Yorker, New York Times, Esquire, TV Guide, and much, much more. He's incredibly funny. This interview is incredibly funny. Let's join the conversation we had with Bill Scheft.
Now, you've worked with so many crazy people. I have to ask, you've worked with Don Rickles, and he recently passed away. So I saw your article in Vulture.
Yes.
And great article.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about working with so many crazy different people and even just the legacy of Don Rickles.
Well, let's talk about Don Rickles first, because the thing about, and I pointed this out in my piece, is that, I started out as a comedian stand-up for 13 years, and my wife was a stand-up for 35 years. And we used to talk about all the time why this guy made it, why this woman made it, why. And we could always understand why people were successful, even though we might not think they're funny. But we never could coalesce it into one thing. And then finally, I was working on this thing for Spike, which was this one night only, which was this Don Rickles roast and tribute, which Dave was on, and I was one of the writers on. And I started re-looking at all of his shots on Letterman, and then I realized that it was just his commitment to his material and the fact that nobody could do his material but him. And
Right.
that's the thing that separates the acts that really make it and have a long career. And a lot of them may not be I may not think are particularly funny. I never cared much for David Brenner's act, but he was hugely successful. He's a great guy. He was a wonderful man off stage, and he was a very solid technician, but he didn't make me laugh like Nick DiPaolo, for
Okay.
instance, or somebody like that, or Richard Belzer or somebody like that. But he had total commitment to his material. And Don is the best example of that, because Don, when you look at the things he says, most of them, they're just absolute nonsense.
Right.
But he commits to it, and he committed to it, and that's why it was. And nobody else could do his stuff but him, and that's why he was so singular and a really nice man. It was a big loss. He died, I guess, at about 4:00.
Wow.
And I wrote a little blog post about him, and then Vulture, a very appropriate name, they swooped in and they said, "Will you write something on Don Rickles and take down that post?" And I said, "Okay."
Yeah, you have a really, really cool Tumblr page and blog that you're writing all kinds of
Thank
cool
you.
stuff on.
Because of you, now we're up to 8 people that follow.
Sweet. It has been a real shift over the last couple of years in the world of comedy. There's been a generation that's been either retiring or passing away, and a new generation taking that banner of comedy. What do you see being the big shift there, and what are the positives, what are the negatives?
Well, I think I think when you look at somebody like, well, let's take, for instance, Jimmy Fallon. Now, Jimmy Fallon is doing the perfect show
Right.
for Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
And it is not a form that I am familiar with, having grown up with the Tonight Show and the Letterman Show. But it works. Now, he is all about this sort of nightly party, almost like a rich kid's birthday party, where he participates in everything. And it is a real departure and a real, it's a celebration.
Yeah.
And as opposed to when I think about the old Letterman show on NBC, the old show, that used to be described as a celebration of failure. And it's just everything is a different phase, and like any art form, it will assume its rightful place. But that is the way to go.
Right.
These shows are now they're big productions. They are stunt heavy, and it's appealing to the people that they need to appeal to, and I think that all these guys are really, really effective. They're really, really effective. Now, is it made for a 60-year-old Jew gag writer? No, I don't think so. But I get it, and I get why they're successful, and I understand why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, Jimmy Fallon was a very good hire by NBC. I didn't think he was because I just knew his stuff from SNL, and he was awkward and twitchy and funny and just kind of an impressionist. And I thought, well, I don't, you need a bit of a real person running a talk show, and I don't think he's like that. Dana Carvey, as great as Dana Carvey is, Dana Carvey does really not have a regular voice that he talks in. No. And so it would be like Dana Carvey having, and Dana Carvey did have a show for a little while, and it didn't really work. But the world is ready for this, and also they have a tremendous grasp of the internet and social media and what's going to play over. And the show is reduced to some moment every night, and that's valid.
It's basically a show of sound bites.
Correct.
And it's just changed a lot. You just came off of producing with your wife a new documentary called Take My Nose, Please.
Right.
It won Best Documentary at Miami Film Festival. First off, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
It looks
Please do not give me any credit for this. Now, let me just explain to you, because the much more interesting point about this movie is the woman behind this movie. So my third novel came out in 2009, Everything Hurts. And I was promoting it on the Letterman show, which Dave was always really nice about and having me on whenever I had a book out. And I get an email the next day, "Are you my cousin from Brockton, Massachusetts?" Some woman, Joan Crone, her grandmother was the sister of my grandfather.
Wow.
On my mother's side. And she says, "I'm a writer too, and we have to meet, and I'm going to come see you at the 92nd Street Y." I did a thing at the 92nd Street Y where Susie Essman interviewed me when my book came out. And I met her, and she was 80, and she was just this vibrant person. And she said to me, "I'm a writer too." And it reminds me of the old joke that a friend of mine used to do in his act, where Robert De Niro shot and killed Anson Williams at a party when Anson Williams said, "Oh, you're an actor just like me." When somebody says, "I'm a writer too," usually they're not. She said, "Let me send you something." And I figure, she's 80.
Yeah.
She's going to send me something from 1972. Well, she sent me something from like 2 weeks before in Allure magazine that was so well reported, I mean, she's got all the moves. She's got all the chops. She's a real reporter. And she got, among other stories she broke, she got a jailhouse interview with Scott Thorson, who was Liberace's lover.
Wow.
And right after the HBO movie came out with Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
And was it Matt Damon who played? I can't remember who played Scott Thorson. It might have been Matt Damon.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And Behind the Candelabra. So she got a jailhouse interview with this guy, and I said, "Joni, how did you get a jailhouse interview with Scott Thorson?" She said, "I put $1,000 in his canteen account." So she is old school.
Wow.
She's been a working journalist for many, many years.
Yeah.
And she's been with
completely legit.
Totally legit, and has credits that you and I would dream of having. The term high tech, she invented that term, a book that she wrote in the early 70s. She invented the term high tech. So, but her foremost area of expertise is plastic surgery. She knows everything about plastic surgery, and she's written extensively on it. So 5 years ago, my now late wife and I, my wife died 4 months ago, went to heaven, and she was a brilliant comedian, and that's how we met as stand-ups. And so we're over her house, and Joni says, I want to make a movie. She's never made a movie. And I want to make a movie about plastic surgery.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that the only people that talk openly about plastic surgery, either theirs or others, are female comics.
Yeah.
So I said, well, there's your movie.
Yeah.
And she said, you mean a movie about female comics and plastic surgery? And Adrian says, yeah, and we'll help you. So this is like conversations that people have all the time, like, you know, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be, well, son of a bitch, she makes the movie. She makes the movie. I mean, Adrian and I both set her up with some people that are in the movie, and I made a couple of calls. But I mean, really, and I guess for that you're made an executive producer. I don't know how to figure that out. But so she makes this movie, and we're now she's in 8 festivals. And as you kindly mentioned, the first one we went to, Miami, she won Best Documentary. I'm going out next week to Newport Beach and Tucson, and she's in San Francisco and the Berkshires and San Luis Obispo and all over. And it is a very funny movie. It's a very poignant movie. It has a lot of layers to it. It's called Take My Nose, Please, which is a tremendous title.
Yeah.
And one of the through lines is she found a young comic and an older, very established comic actress, Jackie Hoffman, and got them both to get nose jobs in the course of the film.
What?
So we follow them. So it's a tremendously layered movie, and I'm so excited for her. So I go out with her and I take care of her, and I watch everybody make a fuss over her, and because she's an 89-year-old first-time filmmaker, and she's just I can't say enough about her. And she says, I just want to sell this and make my money back so I can make my next movie. And I said, what's your next movie? And she says, I'm going to do the history of Botox. And I said, Joni, that's fine, but your next movie is I'm going to get a friggin' camera and we're going to just shoot you talking for an hour and a half. That's the next movie, because that's much more interesting than the history of Botox.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned your late wife. Our condolences, of course.
Thank you.
Amazing comedian, Adrian Tolsch.
Yes.
Lots of funny topical stuff, especially around the Jewish world and family
Yes.
and that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit about the dynamic of how you guys met, and just because you guys.
I'll tell you how we met, because it's a great story. But I'll also tell you that, I was a comic for 13 years, and then I was lucky enough to get hired at the Letterman Show in 1991. And so then I became like a full-time writer. And when people would meet us after that, they would say, oh, you're a comic and you're a writer. Do you write for your wife? And I would always say the same thing. I would say, here's how I write for my wife. Whenever she says something funny, which is frequently, I say, write that down. That's how I write for her. I remind her to write it, but I don't give, she don't need me. But Adrian was the first female house MC at Catch a Rising Star, which is which was the biggest comedy club in the country, and she was the most important person at that club in 1979, when there were 6 women comics.
Wow.
There were 6, and she was very influential and very important. She ran audition night on Monday night. So in December of 1980, I just moved to New York. I was a sports writer in Albany, and I left Albany. And if you've ever been to Albany, you know it's not some of God's best work. And so I came to New York, and I auditioned to Catch a Rising Star, and she was the MC. And I did, back then, you can audition every 4 weeks until they passed you or told you not to come back. And I did well. And she said, you're very funny. Instead of coming back in 4 weeks, come back in 2 weeks. And I thought, wow, this is so great. Well, I auditioned another 5 times, and she wouldn't pass me. Now, she claims, and luckily she's not with us anymore, so it's now my word. She claims I only auditioned twice more. I auditioned 5 more times. Finally, she passed me in June, and I became a regular there. And you go on late at night. Back then, you go on at 2 in the morning, and for 3 drunks, and Then I became a late night MC, and then the house MCs back then were Adrian, Bill Maher, and a guy named J.J. Wall, who became a producer, writer-producer, was a very, very funny comic. And they were the three house MCs. And then Bill Maher got The Tonight Show in 1982, and he moved to California, and I replaced him as one of the house MCs. So I was the house MC at Catch a Rising Star for 5 years. So I brought up everybody, and I honed my act, and it was a very fortuitous time because that was the comedy boom. All these clubs opened up all over the country, and comics were now seen on television, and you could really make a living at it. And I was on the road. Adrian and I were on the road each 30 weeks a year, and I performed all over the country, all over Canada. I went to Australia 3 times. I toured in Australia 3, and it was you could make a really legit living at it. But I always wanted to be a writer. I started as a sports writer, and I did stand up because it was how I could make a living, and I was good enough at it, certainly. And but I didn't, as Adrian would say, I didn't have the sickness. I didn't have to be on stage. And so speaking of 5, the Letterman show started in 1982, and I submitted 5 times to that show.
Wow.
And was turned down 5 times. And, in show business, you're not turned down. They just don't call you.
Yeah.
And when they need you, they call you. And on the 6th time, I got hired as a monologue writer because they had a monologue writer, Larry Jacobson, who was a very good writer, who had left and moved out to L.A., and I replaced him.
And that was on Late Night?
That was on Late Night. I was there for the last 2 years of Late Night and the 22 years at CBS. So that's my story. And Adrian kept performing and kept, just got better and better. And like the thing we were talking about before, she developed an act that nobody could do but her.
Right.
And that's when you're really a comic.
Yeah.
When, people can steal your lines, but it's not the same. They can't take your essence up there. And
it's the X factor, as they say. That
I'll just tell you one of
something.
Adrian's lines is one of my favorites. She said, I went out with a lot of Jewish guys. I went out with one guy who was so Jewish, he lived with another guy's mother. And
I remember that joke.
Isn't that a great joke?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's actually, if you go to your YouTube channel,
it is.
It's one of the videos.
It is on
there.
her YouTube. Yeah. On that video. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great video. Now, you've mentioned Letterman. Obviously, you've been a writer there, but in the world of Letterman, you're not just a writer or a producer or something like that. There's a real cohesion between, like you even did, what was it called? The numbers, the jersey.
Oh, yeah, uniform numbers.
Uniform numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it looked like you guys were having a blast every night of the day.
Well, here's the thing about Dave and myself. He's 10 years older than I am, and yet I grew up with older brothers and sisters. So my points of reference are older than I am.
Yeah.
So between that and the fact that we were both comics and we knew a lot of the same people, we had this immediate connection that he didn't have with the other people that worked on the show.
Right.
So and we kind of cultivated that over the years. And it's funny that you mentioned uniform numbers because that was an idea that he came up with.
Well, here's what I'd have to say about the Letterman show, because I'm a huge fan.
Yes.
Is that a lot of the people that work there for an incredibly long time.
Yes.
And they were really vested in that show.
Yes.
They're heavyweights. I mean, the people that were behind the scenes were just so brilliant. And it's like, yeah, Dave and Paul got the limelight, but there was this massive team of just incredible people that made an amazing show.
Well, let me tell you, you're absolutely right. So when we celebrated 30 years in late night, so it was 2012, February of 2012. So between the old show and the new show, it was 30 years in late night. That night, February 2nd, we did a top 10 list of things I've always wanted to say to Dave, and they were of the longest tenured staffers.
Yeah.
So there were 10 people in that top 10. And at the time, I had been there 21 years.
Wow.
I wasn't even close to making that list.
There is a lot more to this interview. You should go check it out. Season 1, episode 25 with Bill Sheft. You can check out these episodes and so many other incredible guests simply by going to jumbleThink.com. You can find every episode. Well, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, go chase those dreams and change the world around you.
Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.